Welcome back, focused learners. I am incredibly excited to dive into another explainer with you today, designed to bring some really complex science right into focus. For our grade 9 students at St. Paul American School Clark, the exact production title of today's journey is G9, Biology, Unit 02, Lesson 04, Cellular Energy and How Organisms Obtain Energy. We are going to look specifically at how life on Earth captures, transforms, and uses the energy it needs to just, survive. It's this massive planetary scale story, but the crazy part is that it happens entirely at the microscopic level, right inside living cells.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for this explainer. First, objective, obtaining cellular energy. Second, explanation, photosynthesis and respiration. Third, model, energy and carbon flow. Fourth, misconception check, matter and energy. Fifth, formative check, assessing understanding. And we'll wrap up with number 6, final recap, core energy concepts. Let's get right into it.
Section 1, objective, obtaining cellular energy.
So what are our actual learning targets for today? We're keeping things laser-focused. By the end of this, you should be able to clearly explain the true significance of photosynthesis to all living things. We also need to identify the major inputs and outputs of these cellular energy processes. We'll figure out exactly how light energy transforms into stored chemical energy. And finally, we're going to trace the transfer of that energy during cellular respiration. I am so ready to act as your guide for these fundamental concepts.
Moving right along to Section 2, Explanation, Photosynthesis and Respiration. To really grasp this, think about human engineering for a second. An electrical energy plant, like a geothermal plant, doesn't just magically create energy out of nothing, right? It takes underground thermal energy, heat, and transforms it into electrical energy that can then be sent to our homes. Well, living cells operate on that exact same principle. Plants and animals have to take in energy from the environment and convert it into a form that their cells can actually use to fuel life functions. Matter and stored energy enter an organism's body in one form, and they are meticulously converted into another.
Now, the biological world is essentially split into two main camps, based on how they get this energy. On one side, we've got photoautotrophs. That literally translates to self-feeders using light. These are your plants, algae, cyanobacteria. They are the only organisms on Earth capable of performing photosynthesis, meaning they capture solar energy to actually manufacture their own food. Then, on the other side, we have heterotrophs, or other feeders. Think animals, fungi, most bacteria. Heterotrophs cannot make their own food. No way. We have to rely entirely on the sugars produced by those photosynthetic organisms. So if you think about it, the energy powering your body right this very second traces directly back to a photoautotroph. So how do photoautotrophs actually pull this off? Photosynthesis is a pretty complex, multi-step process, but it basically plays out in 2 sequential stages. Stage 1 is all about the light-dependent reactions. Here, energy from sunlight gets absorbed by a pigment called chlorophyll, which is tucked away in these little structures called thylakoids inside the plant's chloroplasts. That solar energy is quickly converted into a temporary, high-energy chemical form. Then, stage 2 kicks in. These are the light-independent reactions, sometimes called the Calvin cycle. The plant uses that temporary stored energy to drive the assembly of stable sugar molecules using carbon dioxide gas. In short, light energy is captured and then locked tightly into the carbon-carbon bonds of carbohydrates. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates just how dependent we are on this entire process. Let's make it real. Think about your last trip to the grocery store. It might seem totally disconnected from cellular biology, but virtually every single aisle links directly back to photosynthesis. Meats and dairy? Well, those come from animals that were raised on plant-based foods. Breads, cereals, pastas? They all come from starchy grains and seeds of photosynthesis-dependent plants. Your favorite desserts are sweetened with sucrose, a carbohydrate built entirely by plants. Even the paper bags and some of the packaging plastics are derived from algae and plant materials. Photosynthesis is literally the ultimate source of every single meal you consume.
Okay, Section 3, Model, Energy, and Carbon Flow.
Before we break down the science any further, I want you to internalize this really powerful quote from the source text. It says, "When a top predator, such as a wolf, preys on a deer, the wolf is at the end of an energy path that went from nuclear reactions on the surface of the sun to visible light to photosynthesis to vegetation to deer and finally to the wolf." I mean, wow, that is the unbroken chain of energy transfer. Photosynthesis powers 99% of Earth's ecosystems by acting as this crucial, absolutely essential bridge between solar radiation and the biological food web. When we map this all out into a formal scientific system, you notice something really important about how energy and matter behave. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It just changes forms. Solar energy flows into the plant, becomes chemical energy and glucose, transfers over to the deer, and then finally to the wolf. At every single step, some of that energy is used up for daily movement, and some just dissipates out into the environment as heat. But here is the key difference with matter. The physical chemical elements are simply recombined in different ways. So while energy flows through the system in one direction and dissipates, the physical matter, like carbon, cycles continuously. And that brings us right to the carbon cycle. See, photosynthesis and cellular respiration aren't just tiny microscopic events. They are the global biological engines running the Earth. Through photosynthesis, plants literally pull carbon dioxide right out of the atmosphere to make sugars. Then, through cellular respiration, organisms break those food molecules back down to release energy, transferring that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere and oceans. It's a delicate, massive exchange of carbon between the biosphere, which is all living things, the atmosphere, our hydrosphere, and the geosphere. It's all connected.
Time for Section 4, Misconception Check, Matter and Energy.
So let's pause and clear something up, because this trips a lot of people up. If the main output of photosynthesis is just simple carbohydrates, sugar, how is it possible that something like a soybean has so much protein? Or think about distiller's grain, which is fed to cows specifically for its high protein content. How can a plant, which supposedly only makes sugar using light, air, and water, end up packed full of complex proteins and fats?
The secret here is that sugar is basically biological Legos. It doesn't just get burned for immediate energy. It provides the crucial carbon backbone for the plant. Glucose is the fundamental building block of life. The plant takes that sugar, snaps it apart, and recombines those carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms with other elements, like nitrogen pulled from the soil, to manufacture completely different molecules. So that simple sugar created during photosynthesis literally becomes the structural foundation for proteins, your DNA, and lipids.
Let's see how we're doing. Section 5. Formative check. Assessing understanding.
Picture this, classic biology lab setup. Imagine a test tube filled with a liquid called bromothiamyl blue, and inside is a little aquatic plant called Elodia. Now, bromothiamyl blue is a special indicator. It turns yellow whenever carbon dioxide is present, and it stays blue when carbon dioxide is absent. If you take this test tube and stick it in a dark closet, the liquid turns yellow. But if you place it out in the bright light, it stays blue. Based on everything we've talked about today, why does this happen? Well, it all comes down to which cellular process is winning the tug of war. In the dark, the plant obviously can't perform photosynthesis, so cellular respiration dominates. The plant survives by breaking down its stored food, and as it does, it releases carbon dioxide gas into the water as a waste product. That CO2 turns our indicator yellow, but in the light, photosynthesis dominates. The plant is actively consuming carbon dioxide from the water to build new sugars. Because it's pulling the CO2 out of its environment way faster than respiration is putting it back, the solution stays blue. It's a perfect visual contrast of the inputs and outputs of these two vital processes. Let's land the plane. Section 6. Final recap, core energy concepts. To wrap up, the absolute most important thing to remember is that life operates on a highly organized system of energy capture and release. Here are your explainer takeaways. First, photosynthesis transforms solar energy into stored chemical energy, sugar. Second, cellular respiration is the complementary process that breaks those molecular bonds to release that energy so cells can actually use it to survive. Third, carbon isn't just burned for fuel, it's the vital building block for all biological molecules. And finally, remember the golden rule. Energy flows in a one-way path through ecosystems, while matter, like carbon, continuously cycles. Before we go, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. You now know for a fact that the energy powering your muscles right this very moment originated from nuclear reactions on the sun and was captured by a plant. You also know that photosynthesis relies heavily on carbon dioxide. So, looking at the big picture, how might the rise in carbon dioxide levels currently dissolving into our oceans and atmosphere alter this incredibly delicate global balance of energy and matter in the future? It's a huge question, one that scientists are actively tackling today, and understanding the cellular biology we just explored is step one. Keep asking those big questions, keep digging into these models. And hey, thank you so much for learning with me today. See you next time.